Yes, guys, welcome back to the MMA Sucker Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Frazer. Let's jump straight into it. UFC 302 is now one for the books. It's now history. And I'm going to talk about obviously the main event, the co-main event, and maybe one other fight. I didn't think it was a great card going into it. What played out? We got 9 decisions. I think we got three finishes, all submissions, not a single knockout on the card. It was a long watch. There was some good, there were some good fights. I think there was some disappointing performances, and I do think that there was some expected performances, really. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Queensbury versus Matchroom 5v5 cards that went down on Saturday night, and look ahead to a little bit that's going on this upcoming weekend. But UFC 302's main event, Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It's a really good fight. Makhachev defeats Dustin Poirier by fifth round DAS choke. It's gone down as a DAS. After a fairly competitive first sort of 4.5 rounds, to be honest. Dustin Poirier did a lot better than I thought he would do. With that being said, he lost the fight where I thought he would lose the fight, and that's on the ground. Islam Makhachev, as we know, has now got the hand to go with the feet. Sorry, and he's got the feet. He's got the hands to go with the wrestling, and I think that's what really sort of played out in this fight. Is Dustin Poirier is very as good as he is, as well rounded as this was his third, and let's be honest, final title shot in the UFC. It might have even been his final fight in the UFC, win or lose. Um, but he's very one-dimensional. He's very much a boxer who can, throw in the odd elbow, throw in the odd leg kick, and defend a takedown. Now, his takedown defense looked pretty good in this one. Apart from that wonderful drag takedown that Islam Makhachev landed, I think that was in the third round or in the fourth round. And, the takedown was in the first, I think, sort of 30 seconds that he landed in the first round. Poirier defended fairly well. When he got backed up against the fence, that's when he was taken down. But Makhachev only had a 31% takedown accuracy, or success rate, I should say. 5 takedowns landed of 16 attempted. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about Dustin Poirier's takedown defense in the fight. I thought his jab looked really good. I thought he was catching Makhachev. I thought he could have used the low leg kick a little bit more. Just pulling up the stats here. He landed 3 leg kicks, which for me, against a striker like Makhachev, the low leg kick is a difficult one to really catch and get the takedown. Yes, Makhachev's extremely fast, and if he does catch Poirier, it's kind of game over. But I think Poirier fought a little bit too cautious. Whether that was because he got rocked in that first round, I'm not quite sure. But he did cut Makhachev. I think he cut him twice. I think he cut him in the first round when we saw Makhachev wince. I think, yeah, it was with a jab. He sort of cut him just underneath the eye, and then that elbow in the third round that split Makhachev open. But for me, it was just the takedown defense as well of Dustin Poirier was really good. He obviously was in that Kimura in the first. I think that was in the first or the second round. I get the rounds mixed up because they were all fairly similar. Makhachev landed a takedown in every round, and Dustin was able to be better than Makhachev in a lot of the exchanges on the feet until he wasn't. He was being caught on the feet though, Dustin. That's for me, that was the issue. That Dustin Poirier had. He was losing the fight where he should have been winning the fight, and when he should have been losing the fight, he was also losing the fight. I think if it was going to a decision, it's Makhachev's all day 4-1, in my opinion. I think Dustin won that fourth round. He outlanded Makhachev. It's the only round that he outlanded Makhachev in. Oh no, he outlanded him in the second round as well, but it was fairly one-sided. But it was a really good, and hats off to Dustin Poirier. I think he did a lot better than many people thought he would. But for me, that was last chance saloon for Dustin Poirier. We won't ever see him in a title shot again. Whether we'll see him in the UFC octagon again, I couldn't even tell you that with any certainty. I think that there's a good chance that he hangs up the gloves now because else has he got to prove? He's got generational wealth now. Through the fights with McGregor, through the multiple title fights, the BMFs. I think this was his seventh or eighth UFC headliner. So he got that generational wealth that his kids and his kids' kids and his kids' kids could probably live off now. He's got his hot sauce company. He's always going to be in and around the UFC. I think he speaks really well. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, on the panels with the likes of Anthony Smith and Laura Sanko. Whether he ever goes into commentary, I don't think that's really his bag, as it were. But I don't see any other fights for him other than a potential fight, as we saw Alexander Volkanovski calling out, essentially respectfully calling out Dustin Poirier for a fight later on this year. It's fun. I get it. It's a fun fight, but what does that do for either man, really? A win over Volkanovski for Dustin Poirier. Yeah, well done. You beat a featherweight coming up to lightweight. For Volkanovski, a win over Dustin Poirier, a guy who is, he's not on the best run of form, to say the least. I think he's lost three of his um yeah, so he's 2-2 in his last four, sorry, he's 2-3 in his last five fights. And all three of those have been finishes. And you also 0-2 against the current champion in the division. It doesn't it's a fun fight. On paper, it's a fun fight, and it'll probably, it would definitely sell, but for me, it just doesn't really do anything for either man. Um, the money fights aren't there for him either. He's done the McGregor fight. He's done the fun fight with Michael Chandler. He's done the fun war with Justin Gaethje. These are all things that have been done now. Does he rematch Max Holloway for a third time for the BMF bout? Not for me. Does he go up to welterweight? Not for me. I don't think he's got anything else to prove. I do hope that he doesn't just go down the Tony Ferguson track of trying to get that win, trying to go out on a win, welcoming new guys to the division. He did so with Benoit Saint Denis, and he proved that he's still there, ready to fight. That got him the title shot on the night. Islam Makhachev was just too good. There's a reason that Islam Makhachev is pretty much, in my eyes, he's a pound for pound. I know Dana White said John Jones is a pound for pound, but for me, you have to be active to be the pound. You can't just sort of hold the pound for pound number one ranking. Yes, he's got wins in multiple weight classes, something that Islam Makhachev hasn't done, but John Jones has competed once since February 2020. Sorry, twice. If you include that, if you want to include, okay, so since March 2020, he's competed once against Cyril Gane for 2 minutes and 4 seconds in what is a very favourable matchup for him. You compare that to Islam Makhachev. Let me just have a look. I mean, he's got 8 fights, all wins, 7 finishes, and he's got. I think it's unquestionable for me. John Jones is not the pound for pound number one, but that's a debate for another day. As far as Islam Makhachev's concerned, is he as good as people think that he is now that he's fought a real lightweight? Yes, I do think he is. I don't think he was in any great danger in that fight. I think he sometimes there's a good chance that you can break Islam Makhachev's will because you saw him wilting a little bit in that fight, in my opinion. When it wasn't quite going his way, when Dustin Poirier was able, when he was talking to him in that fourth and fifth round, he didn't seem very fired up. And whether he was fatigued because of the staph infection, which he's admitted that he had, or whether it's, something more, a psychological deficiency, as it were. I think there's a chance to get at Islam Makhachev. With that being said, I think that this war that he's, let's be honest, that's the toughest fight of Islam Makhachev's career, other than the knockout loss, which was a sort of flash knockout loss, which I don't put too much, stock into. Let's not forget, GSP, Anderson Silva, all these guys have got losses on their record. John Jones against Dominic Reyes pretty much lost that fight. All these greats of the game have got losses on their record. I think that Islam Makhachev is going to get so much better from this win. And that's a scary prospect because he's extremely, extremely good now. Um, like I said, he fi- he began to finish fights now, and that is a scary prospect for the entire lightweight and or welterweight division. Um, if you look at, let's look at from from that Dan Hooker fight when he really, for me, announced himself to the world. Dan Hooker, submission in the first round. Bobby Green, TKO in the first round. Charles Oliveira, submission in the second round. Alexander Volkanovski, decision. Alexander Volkanovski, first round finish. Now Dustin Poirier, fifth round finish. Even before that, you got Drew Dober, finish. Gleison Tibau, knockout. He went the distance with Arman Saruki on short notice. He's a seriously good fighter. And I think that this, little bit of a war that he went through with Dustin Poirier, like I said, is actually going to make him even better. Which is, and by that, what I mean is, I think it'll make him more dominant, but I also am worried that it may make him slightly more risk adverse and more boring. He won't look to stand with opponents for as long as he has previously. Um, he'll look to just get the fight to the floor, and it's, let's be honest, Khabib Nurmagomedov was a phenomenal fighter, but he wasn't an entertaining fighter in my opinion. He once he got the fight to the ground, yes, his ground and pound was pretty ruthless, but he enjoyed just lying on people and dominating them in that sort of realm. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing, especially when you get to the level that these guys are at. But I'm worried that that is the way that Islam will go now, to be more risk adverse and to look to dominate opponents. Will he be able to just take down opponents at will? I think most of the opponents that he faces coming up, he will be. Even when he gets up to welterweight, yes, he'll be the smaller guy, but I don't think he'll be drastically undersized because he's a massive lightweight. What we do think, though, is that the next fight for me, and I wrote a piece on MMAsucker.com. I'll post it in the link below, in the bio below. What we do think is that his next fight, and one of the biggest winners from this weekend for me, is Arman Tsarukyan. The reason I think he's one of the biggest winners is because if Dustin Poirier would have won the fight, or in any way, shape, or form, or narrowly won the fight or got a flash knockout, Islam Makhachev is likely to get an immediate rematch, and that kicks Arman Tsarukyan down the road ever so slightly further. With the victory for Islam Makhachev and the dominating way in which he did so, opens the door for the rightful number one contender in Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan's got a 75% takedown defense. The only person that's really been able to take him down, just looking through now, there's two people in his career that have taken him down. Mateus Gamrot took him down 6 times over 25 minutes, and one Islam Makhachev took him down 4 times in 15 minutes when they fought in Arman Tsarukyan's UFC debut. The two men that I've just mentioned there, Arman Tsarukyan and Mateus Gamrot, I think are difficult fights for Islam Makhachev. Mateus Gamrot's got a 90% takedown defense. He's been taken down once, and that was by Arman Tsarukyan. These fights are going to be wrestling heavy fights with a lot of control. And I'm fascinated by the matchups. I do think that, like I said, Islam Makhachev is pound for pound number one on the planet at the moment. And with this win, and with the manner in which the win came, I think he'll be even more dominant going forwards. And then we move to the co-main event. Sean Strickland gets a split decision, which was never a split decision. He dominated the fight, in my opinion. Victory over Paulo Costa. 5-round co-main event. This was a tough watch. For me, Sean Strickland, I'm still, the jury's still out on both Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa. I said last week, I don't know if Paulo Costa's a good fighter or not. I'm really not sure. And for Sean Strickland, I think he's good to a certain level, but when he makes the step up, he's he's made the step up and he's shown that he is at a high level. What I mean by that is that you can find a way to. Sean Strickland is a walk forward fighter. He'll put the pressure on for the full, in this case, 25 minutes, full 15 minutes, whatever kind of length fight that he fights in. He's not a finisher. He's broke the record now for most decisions, I think, at middleweight. Oh, sorry, no, the longest time fought in the octagon at middleweight. He's broke the record now for most split decisions in the UFC. And you look at the guys that have beaten him. Alex Pereira obviously knocked him out in that first round. Dricus du Plessis last time out mixed in the wrestling, which I really think was a missed opportunity by Paulo Costa. And Jared Cannonier narrowly outpointed him. It was a very, very close fight. Um, it was a split decision. But he allows guys to think that they can get off and get a pace on him. Abbas Magomedov, Israel Adesanya, and now Paulo Costa. He allows people to think that they can get ahead in the fight before he just begins to dominate them. But it's getting a bit same old for me. Sean Strickland's got 2 TKO finishes since 2020. I get one against Abbas Magomedov and one against Brendan Allen. He hasn't put back to back. I'm just having a look now. He's never put back to back finishes together. And how much does that play on the matchmaker's mind? I know Dana White is in love with Sean Strickland. It's the whole having Trump next to the cage thing that I think Sean Strickland's personality wise, I think he's dreadful for the sport. Fighter wise, I think he's quite good for the sport because he's going to be in and around that top 2 or 3. He's probably going to remain number one in the division. But for me, it's the lack of he never tries to look to finish a fight. And I think despite the fact that he walks forward a lot, I think Sean Strickland is scared to engage in a firefight and get knocked out, just as he did against Alex Pereira. He very rarely, unless he's got his opponent hurt or his opponent is ridiculously fatigued, he very rarely steps into the fire and looks to really cement himself on the fight and look for the finish. He hurt Israel Adesanya and he went looking for the finish. And then when the finish didn't come, he stepped back and he never looked for the finish again. Against Abbas Magomedov, Magomedov faded massively in that fight. Sean Strickland recognised that hurt him and ultimately finished him in that second round. Against Paulo Costa, he had a fairly wounded animal. Paulo Costa was doing well, slamming the low leg kicks into Sean Strickland. I think he was hoping that would affect his forward movement that little bit more. But Strickland was able to begin to time them and check them a lot better than he did in the second, third round. He timed them a lot better than he did in that first round. And that, I think, broke Paulo Costa. I think Paulo Costa expected that to do a lot more damage to Sean Strickland and reduce that forward movement of Sean Strickland, which it didn't. And that for me is where Paulo Costa lost the fight. It's sort of in that second and third round is Sean Strickland broke his will and just continued to do what he was doing throughout the entire fight. I mean, the numbers, he's picked up his intensity. That first round, 24 strikes landed. Second round, 25 strikes landed. And then third, fourth, and fifth, you've got 45 strikes landed, 39 strikes landed, and 49 strikes landed. He's pretty consistent at upping his output in those later rounds. And Paulo Costa had no real answer for it. And I don't know what, I think Israel Adesanya broke Paulo Costa. I really do. Obviously, he got the title shot back in 2020, knocked out by Israel Adesanya. Then he went the distance with Marvin Vettori, where he just couldn't be bothered to try and even remotely make weight. Then he had that war with Luke Rockhold, where Luke Rockhold took him the full 15-minute distance after being out for 3 years and being, I'll be honest, Luke Rockhold was way past it. He then took some time out of the octagon. Paulo Costa returned against Robert Whittaker, looked gun shy in that one, and he looked gun shy in this one. I don't think he could get past the jab of Sean Strickland. And it's not, this is mixed martial arts. This isn't boxing. To be stuck and completely and utterly confused by a jab of Sean Strickland, and it's not just Sean Strickland, to be completely and utterly confused by a jab of any opponent, I think shows low level IQ in mixed martial arts. And that's where That's where Paulo Costa kind of messed up in this one. If you look at his early record on his debut, first round knockout, second fight, second round knockout against Johnny Hendricks, second round knockout against Uriah Hall, second round knockout. He had that war fight of the night, fight of the year contender against Yoel Romero. And then it's just gone downhill. He said, I'm going to come out and be the old Paulo Costa. Well, sorry, mate. It may be too late to be the old Paulo Costa. How, he's always going to be a personality, but how interested are you in Paulo Costa's next fight? Because for me, if he's going to be as gun shy as he was in this one and he was against Robert Whittaker, he landed that spinning kick against Robert Whittaker. Then what else did he do? I mean, it's the same with Sean Strickland. I've got no interest in seeing Sean Strickland fight for a belt because I don't think he deserves it based on the performance against a gun shy, shot to bits Paulo Costa, in my opinion. Paulo Costa for me next. I think he takes a step down in competition significantly. Michel Pereira at 13. I think that'd be a phenomenal fight, especially if Paulo Costa's claiming that he's gonna go back to the old kind of more reckless Paulo Costa. Main event in Brazil. I'm all over it. I'm all over that. And for me, Sean Strickland faces the winner of Robert Whittaker or Hamzat Chimaev. That obviously goes down this month in Saudi Arabia, I think it is, or next month in Saudi Arabia. Um, that's the fight to make for me. I know he called for a title shot and said he's been the company man, but he's also doesn't deserve it. I think Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis goes down at UFC 305, I can imagine, in Perth, um, for the middleweight strap. I think that happens. And then Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev or Robert Whittaker, depending on who wins that one. I think that one goes down, later on in the year for another number one contender shot. The middleweight division is hot at the moment. You've got Dricus du Plessis. Realistically, he could fight Sean Strickland next. He probably is going to fight Israel Adesanya. There could be that Robert Whittaker rematch. Jared Cannonier fights this weekend against Nasruddin Imanov. He hasn't, there's a potential that Jared Cannonier could fit into a title shot as and when. Then you've got Marvin Vettori and Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen is on a sick winning streak at the moment. There's lots of opportunities in the middleweight division, and it is certainly an exciting division. And at middleweight, doing what he always kind of does, not looking great, and then getting the win. Kevin Holland snaps the arm of Michael Olenszejczuk. Horrible, horrible finish. I wish he tapped, but fair play to Michael, sort of going out on your sword, as it were. Um, he was dropped. Kevin Holland, was it a slip? Was it a drop? Whatever happened, he managed to lock up the armbar, get the performance of the night bonus, and submit Michael Olenszejczuk. But that was kind of it from the card. We kicked off the night with five straight decisions. Jake Matthews just doing what he does, a decision. Grant Dawson, I was kind of disappointed in, to be honest. Grant Dawson, I think will go down as possibly one of the biggest sort of what ifs in UFC history. Because he started really well. He got the contract back in 2017 on the Contender Series. He then put a 5-fight win streak together, and then drew with Ricky Glenn. Then he put a 3-fight winning run together, including a win over Damir Ismagulov and Mark Madston. And then he lost that fight to Bobby Green in 33 seconds in his first main event. He bounces back against Joe Solecki, but I wanted a better performance, to be honest, against Joe Solecki. He went the distance in that one. Alan Perez called for a fight with Kayla Harrison after going to yet another decision. The fact that her entire kind of personality is based on the fact that she twerks in the octagon and dances and twerks on the weigh-in stage makes me cringe. But she's on a 3-fight winning streak. Mickey Gall's no longer in the UFC, I can't imagine, after losing to Basil Hafiz. Obviously Basil got the opportunity against Jack Della Maddalena on short notice, did well in that one. And I mean, Jayton Almeida's going to Jayton Almeida. He got back in the win column. He's asked for a fight with Cyril Gane in September. Depends how the UFC want to see it, because that's a horrible fight for Cyril Gane. If they want Cyril Gane to continue being in and around the heavyweight title picture probably don't do that fight. They probably give him to I don't know what they do with Jason Almeida next, but fans were booing it because he doesn't have an entertaining style. Let's not get it twisted. The fight went on for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. He got the rear naked choke over Alexander Romanov, who at one point I thought could be a real player. 16-0, finishing guys with crazy submissions. He's got a forearm choke, he's got a key lock on there, he's got a couple of TKOs on there, and then he's just not lived up to the hype. It's with the greatest respect, you can just see that he doesn't really care visually, if you get what I'm saying. But yeah, the fight went just under 2.5 minutes, and there were three strikes landed. Tells you all you need to know. But as far as the actual action's concerned, that's it for me. That it wasn't on paper, it wasn't a great card, and it played out to be a very, very long night. Um, Long night of action. But sometimes, unfortunately, you're going to get that because you know, this just the way that fights line up sometimes. That's just the way it is. You put a lot of, you know, 301 in Brazil, 303 with McGregor, now Ian Gary, MVP, Jamar Hill. You had 300 a couple of months ago. Sometimes that's the way it's going to go, and you kind of spend a lot of money on better fighters. You've got to kind of scrape to make the undercard, and these fighters aren't finishers. Moving on to 5v5 Queensbury versus Matchroom. Great idea, great gimmick. I'll be honest, I don't think a lot of fans cared whether Eddie Hearn won or Frank Warren won. I think it was just fans really cared about the fights that we were getting. And Frank Warren did win. It was a whitewash, 5-0. Willie Hutchinson put on a great performance against Craig Richards. Craig Richards was a favourite going into it. Willie Hutchinson got ahead early and managed to just about, survive out the final few rounds. Nick Ball and Raymond Ford put on one of the best featherweight fights that you'll see. Nick Ball, now world champion, more than deserved. Hamza Shiraz was rock Boston Williams in the second or third round, I think it was, and then just went through the gears. I think Hamza Shiraz will get a title shot. And then, believe it or not, the floater on the card with Dimitri Bivol versus Malkin Zinad. Fair play to Zinad. I think he was undefeated coming into this one. He went for it, but Dimitri Bivol actually got a sixth round TKO in that one. Remember, this was supposed to be the card that Bivol was fighting Beterbiev. Hopefully and supposedly that one's going to go back. That one's going to get booked again. And then we had the two heavyweight fights. Daniel Dubois beat Filip Hrgovic by eighth round TKO due to cuts on the eye. Yes, there were headbutts, but the majority of the cuts to the eye came as a result of Daniel Dubois doing really good work. And I think he faces Anthony Joshua next for the full IBF title once the IBF strip Alexander Usyk. And that's a fight that I'd be all over. A Battle of Britain, Battle of London. I think Dubois from London. I know Joshua is. That'll be a phenomenal fight. And then in the main event, we had Zhilei Zhang retire Deontay Wilder from high level competition. It's a shame because I like Deontay Wilder. I know, he did have the whole I want a body on my record thing, which I didn't agree with. We spoke about that before, but he was just absolutely battered in that fight. Once Zhang realized that Wilder was being a little bit gun shy in the early rounds, he then went through the gears, forced Wilder to, swing wildly, ironically, and caught him. The problem with Zhang is he's big, he's a southpaw, he uses his size well. He managed to bully Deontay Wilder in there, and he can crack as well. And he can box, so it makes him a very dangerous prospect for most of the people in the division. But I thought overall, I think it was a really good fight. And for Deontay Wilder, like I say, I think he's done now at the top level. I don't want him to carry on fighting these guys to try and get that next win. A bit like Dustin Poirier I spoke about earlier. I don't want him to fight guys so that the other guys can then get a world title shot. That's not what I want to happen. Would I be against Deontay Wilder? jumping over to influencer boxing and knocking out Jake Paul now that Mike Tyson fight is off. Sign me up for that because that's something I want to see. For the obvious reason, I think that he would kill Jake Paul. Um, Moving on this weekend, we've got KSW 95 on Friday night. That looks like a pretty good. We've got bantamweight main event. Co-main event is a heavyweight title fight with England's Phil de Vries against Augusto Sakai. Martin Held is on the cards. This is, KSW just continue to put on good sleeper cards. One championship on Friday night have got their in Bangkok this weekend. Rodtang, I think that's yeah, Rodtang's on the card. Liam Harrison's on the card. Cade Rotolo makes his MMA debut. I think that's his MMA debut. I'd need to double check that. And the one lightweight championship is also on the line in the featherweight championship is on the line in Muay Thai. I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. We've got a Cage Warriors card from San Diego. Nothing to really look out. Wilson Hayes is on the card. Jesus. Wilson Hayes is still going. But it's all about, there's two cards that we really need to focus on this weekend. I'm going to talk about the UFC briefly because it's not the best card in the world. We've got Jared Cannonier versus Nassourdine Imavov, which will go 25 minutes in the main event at middleweight. That's just a fact, unfortunately. In the co-main event, it's an exciting one. Dominic Reyes, will he finally return? Because he's been booked a lot. Dominic Reyes, let's not forget this guy's on a 4-fight losing streak, of which 3 have been knockout losses. After losing that decision to John Jones back in 2020, he's without a win since October 2019 when he defeated Chris Weidman. Yeah. But he had the fight with Carlos Ulberg booked. Ulberg pulled out. He then had it rescheduled. And then Reyes pulled out in March. He now faces Dustin Jacoby. Not an easy fight at all for Dominic Reyes. Just Dustin Jacoby, he is 1-3 in his last 4. If you look at the guys that he's lost to, Alonzo Menafield, Muzakhanov, and Khalil Roundtree, it's going to be a pretty good stand-up battle, I think. Raul Rosas Jr. returns to take on Ricky Turcosis. Pretty Ricky, he calls himself. Jesus. I think this is a good fight for Raul Rosas Jr. Let's be honest, he's just staying active before he competes on that Sphere card later on in the year in September. You got Bruno Ferreira, who's just all action against Dustin Stofus. Julian Marquez returns against Zach Reese. Puna Soriano against Miguel Baez. I think that's a great fight. Baez, it's just all action. Thiago Moises returns against Ludwig Klein. Brad Katona returns against Jesse Butler. We've got Montella De La Rosa and Andrea Lee facing off in a rematch. Taylor Lapalus and Cody Stamen compete against each other. Undefeated Daniel Marcos takes on John Castaneda, and we've got the UFC debut. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The first Indian fighter, certainly the first Indian female fighter, Pooja Tomar, the Cyclone, making her UFC debut. But for me, the card of the weekend is PFL Europe live from Newcastle, England on Saturday night. Main evented by the MMA debut of the world champion boxing star Savannah Marshall. She takes on Mirella Vargas. In the co-main event, we've got Dylan Tuke versus Kane Musa, Jack Grant versus Charlie Leary, Dean Garnett versus Aton De Pape. Chanel Dyer, keep an eye out on Chanel Dyer. She's 4-0. She takes on Marima Torchachi Ave. I can't even say her name, to be honest, but Chanel Dyer will win that one. But there's 2 fights on this card, or 2 or 3 fights, I should say, that I think we really need to keep an eye out. This is they're kicking off, I think, the bantamweight and the women's flyweight European tournament. it's not a high. Understand this that especially in the women's game, it's not a high level. And that's no disrespect to any of the women in there, but you've got Dee Begley. Um, she's 1-4 in her last 5 fights on a 3-fight losing streak. She's got a losing record of 4-5. Is competing in this tournament. She's taking on Paulina Wiseniewska, a 25-year-old Polish girl. She's 2-0. She did compete in IMAF, so that's kind of a feather in a cap. You've got Valentina Skitazzi, who got to the final last year based on the fact that her opponent didn't make weight, and then she was just dominated by Dakota Ditcheva. She takes on Marie Loisenet. Forgive me if I've pronounced that wrong, but 43 years old, French woman, um, who's 6-4. You've got Lizzie Gervais, no flow. Lizzie Gervais, she's 3-1. Her only loss comes to Skiditsy last year. She beat Dee Begley earlier this year. She takes on Sammy Jo Luxton, who's got a lot of potential. Sammy Jo. She's 25 years old. She's very, very good at Muay Thai. It's someone I've spoke about a lot. She's got 2 wins, both of which have come in under 20 seconds. But if you have seen any of those wins, which I'm sure you have done, they are against some of the worst competition I've ever seen. Jodie Gormley doesn't even have a proper Tapology page. I think they just made it so, that was an 18-second KO. She then scored another 18-second KO against a girl called Agata Trusakolowska. For context, Agata lost her debut in just under 2 minutes by armbar, then lost to Sammy Jo in 18 seconds, then lost last time out in 25 seconds, and is now somehow booked for another bout. Sammy Jo Luxon's got a lot of potential, but this is a massive step up in competition. This is a girl who can actually take a punch in Lizzie Gervais. It's a risk for Sammy Jo in a way because we don't know just how good she is. I think she's really good, but we don't know how good she is. But for me, I want to keep an eye out. Like I said, Sammy Jo, definitely keep an eye out for her because there's a potential that we've got a superstar on our hands there. She's been going through some stuff in her personal life that may affect her performance. We'll see. I hope it doesn't. I hope she's just fully focused. Chanel Dyer, definitely keep an eye out on Chanel Dyer. Kane Musa and Dylan Tuke in the co-main event is really fun. And then I want to see what Savannah Marshall's like with the 4-ounce gloves because she's a heavy hitter. Let's not forget she's only got one professional boxing loss, and that's to Clarissa Shields. She beat Clarissa Shields in the amateurs. She's a heavy hitter in boxing, and I think that will transition over to MMA. But yeah, that was your sort of and well, that was your MMA Sucker podcast for this week. I'll be back next week to discuss the UFC and the PFL and look ahead. It was supposed to be the McGregor versus Chandler press conference today. That didn't go ahead. I'm sure it will come out why that didn't go ahead later on today. But yeah, that's been cancelled, so there won't be anything on that. But it's exciting times for MMA. It's exciting times for Islam Makhachev. It's not so much exciting times for Sean Strickland, who himself admitted that he had a lackluster performance. But yeah, drop a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video. Drop a comment. If you disagree or agree with anything that I've said, just let me know, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.